This is me all tense, waiting to find out who has won the CBBC Show Selector. I did a little bounce and everything, did you see it? Well, I'll do it again, watch. There's my little bounce.
So all you have to do is hit Barney right in his lovely face with one of the pies,
Can I stay here, please?
Come through, come on, don't be shy. Right, are you ready? Come on, guys. Right, in 3, 2, 1, go.
Let's go get our prankster, dear.
Trump towers reach up to the sky, and in Jiaoxing you will see there are 5. Oh, well, huh. Tell me more. They built one for each clan, and what's more, they did it with no plan.
My dream, I am the Time Lord. Right, where are we going to go? Handbrake off. How about if we go to 1966 World Cup? That's what it's all about. Okay, here we go. Whoa! What? Oh, that's not good.
So, hi, Barney. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for asking. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's strange to see you in this light because, Zoe and I were discussing, but we've seen you through a very different screen for our entire childhood. And so I'm really, really interested to learn more about you and your childhood and what got you into your journey into children's television and now what you're, up to today. So take me back. What era did you grow up in?
So I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 1979. November of 1979, so only just in the 70s. And so by the time I was 7, 8 years old and really into kids' telly, it was shows like Centurions, Simon and the Witch. Simon and the Witch for a few reasons, not just because it was magical. It was one of those sort of comedy sitcoms that, every kid my age just loved. But there was a girl in it called Nicola Stapleton who was my first proper crush as well, my first sort of head dive into that world. Whizbit, Rent-A-Ghost. There were so many classic shows that are classic now, I suppose, that they were all magical. They were all, you escaped your front room and went into this world. It was amazing. But those were the sort of shows that I remember. Whizbit, because it was off its nuts. It was just a crazy show. And Rent-A-Ghost, I think, for the same reason. It was all, I think magic might have been a theme. Now that I'm saying this out loud, I think magic may have been a real important theme for me as a kid, for sure. Because it was also a sense of escapism as well. But yeah, those were the kind of shows that I watched. Yeah, it didn't really matter what I was watching, as long as it had some element of, other reality and magic. I think that was really what sort of turned me on to, I guess, being creative as well. It really helped with my playtime. Whenever I was running out in the street, there were shows on TV like Street Hawk and Knight Rider, so of course I was pretending to be Michael Knight and driving a car made out of cardboard that I put a little, a red light on that I painted on. But I think, a lot of the escapism for me was playtime as well as watching kids telly. And I think that was the first time I really, experienced something else outside of just being in a house.
Were you always more of a TV watcher than a reader? Were you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't read. What would you read for? If I did read, it would be comics. It would be like the Beano or the Dandy. In fact, the Beano was my comic and the Dandy was my brother's comic. These used to cost 20p, and the only reason we liked them was because every week you'd get a free lollipop or a free packet of popping candy or something like that in them. 20 pence. I wonder how much they are now. I bet they're fortunes now.
After growing up watching children's TV, when was your first sort of intercept into the entertainment industry?
Well, my dad's a comedian, and from a really early age, I remember following him around various theatres and tours, and he did a bit of TV in the early days as well. Back in the day, there was a show called The Fame Game, which is a bit like Britain's Got Talent now, hosted by a guy called Tim Brooke-Taylor, who was one of the original, what was he in? Oh, The Goodies, and a comedian called Stan Boardman, and they used to go onto this show and tell jokes until basically the audience got bored, and this cartoon crook would come on around the neck and pull them off when they got boring. And my dad was on that and he won it like 7 weeks in a row, and it was the first time I'd really seen the connection between a human being who I knew pretty well and the TV. And I was like, how did you get in there? I was only a kid, I was only about 8 or 9 at the time. And it was the first time I really realised that it was something that was achievable because my dad was doing it. I mean, theatre is really where I wanted to be, I think, if I was being honest. I love theatre. I love the idea that you can perform to an audience rather than perform to a camera and hope they're enjoying what you're doing. You get real-time feedback in a theatre, and there's no sound like it. There's no sound like laughter in a room that's designed to acoustically enhance it. You know, the Matcham theatres, for example, like the Lincoln Theatre, the Grand, and you've got, you know, Blackpool Grand, and these are the Theatre Royals, and those sort of venues that were designed by geniuses to glorify reaction from these performers. It's visceral. It's something that I can't describe unless you're on a stage looking out there and you're hearing that reaction. That was something that I really wanted to do. And I remember watching my dad when I was a kid. He was on stage. He was on tour with Cannon and Ball at the time. I remember watching him thinking. So I was sort of watching him do his thing and then looking at the audience that I'm a part of with my brother. I remember looking around, going, "I want to do this. I want to be on there, doing that and making this happen." It was pivotal for me because a lot of kids don't know what they want to be. A lot of adults don't know what they want to be yet. And I kind of knew from a really early age that I wanted to do something that meant I was on stage or performing. So I was in every school show, I was in every choir, I joined everything that I could join to try and, you know, work on my chops. And then the journey into TV is a long and convoluted one. But I mean, if you've got 4 hours, I can tell you.
Well, I'm most curious because something that I found super, super interesting in the research and from chatting to you is actually that before you came into the world of TV, you were in a band, and you actually signed a record deal and did a bunch of stuff on tour way before you were known as the BBC children's presenter. How did that come about?
So I've always been a musician. So I've played piano since I was a kid and guitar a bit later. I learned saxophone at school and clarinet, and I think it was still part of the performing bug. I wanted to do something that gave me that ticket to the stage, you know, and I wasn't a comedian, I didn't have an act. I didn't really, you know, I wasn't an actor, but what if I played piano and that way I could get onto a stage, and that might be my transition. And so I sent a tape off to a guy called Nigel Martin Smith, who was the manager of a band called Take That, who did okay. And he was looking for a new band. It was called Talent 2000. But it was in '96, but it was called Talent 2000. And he was on Granada Tonight doing an interview saying that he's looking for local talent, looking for local keyboard players and guitarists to join this band. And it was actually my mum who sent the tape off. I had a little Toshiba, I had a Toshiba PC, old school, like it had tapes to load the games in. But that recorder that you used to play the tapes in to load the games, you could also press play and record through the little microphone that was on it. So I remember setting it up and playing a few party pieces, a few little show-off bits and sending it off. And sure enough, I got the phone call and they wanted me to go in and be the keyboard player for this band. So that was the thing that we did for 2 years. We wrote albums with very famous people, a guy called Elliot Kennedy who wrote with Bryan Adams and Steps and Spice Girls and Five. We went on tour with Five. We did all those things that you're supposed to do. And then we got offered a record deal in Japan. This guy called Satoshi came over. Loved him. He was amazing. He was 4'1", blonde hair. Always had a camera with him. Super happy guy all the time. Loved what we were doing and said that the girls were going to go crazy for it. But at that time, the band had sort of been together for a few years and we weren't really... We were teenagers. We were really young boys with really young brains. We had no experience of anything. We didn't really know what we had. It was... now looking back, I would have done things entirely differently. I think we all would have done, but... We were just kids who were getting bored with the fact that nothing had really happened for us. So by the time Satoshi came over, we weren't really gelling as a band, we weren't really getting on, and it was kind of the beginning of the end, really. But Nigel, as one last push, wanted to get one of us onto telly, onto TV, so that we could raise the profile of that person, and then that would raise the profile of the band. So Andy Peters had just got over to Channel 4 at the time, and they were looking for a presenter for this new show called Planet Pop. It was produced by a company called Straight TV. Which Nigel was an exec of, and so I think I was the one that had the most confidence in the band. I think I was able to blag it a little better than they were, and that's all it was. I had no skill, no talent whatsoever, never presented in front of a camera before. Even at home, I'd never done it. It was never a thing I wanted to do, but ended up getting the job on Channel 4 at 17 years old. My first job was to go to Lake Garda to interview Steps. They were doing a video there called One for Sorrow. I'm this young boy, fresh out of Blackpool, who's got no experience, and all of a sudden I'm on TV on Channel 4, and that was it, really. So I did a couple of series of that, and then by the end of it, the band had really started to slide. And Nigel, basically, after Planet Pop had finished, said, you've got two choices. You're now an established presenter, kind of, and you've also got the band, but we're going to replace a few band members. So do you want to go through this whole thing again, or would you rather just be a presenter now? And there was work available. I was being offered work as a presenter, and I'd been paid money. I'd never earned money like that before as a kid. I'd worked in a hotel, but I'd never made TV money. And of course, for me, that was like, yeah, let's do the telly thing. This looks great. And so I kind of fell into it by accident, really. And that's how I became a TV presenter.
Did you know you'd find your pathway into children's TV in particular? Did it kind of, or were you kind of open to doing anything, and it just happens that children's TV loved you, shall we say?
It's kind of serendipitous in the way it came full circle. I didn't really think of kids telly or Blue Peter or any of those avenues as being somewhere that I would end up, because I didn't have any skill as a presenter, as a standalone presenter. But talking about music, I can do that all day long, and Planet Pop was a music show. I'm interviewing bands and I'm talking on the same level with these people because I can completely relate with what they do. I'm a songwriter myself and blah, blah, blah. We had the record deal and it all kind of worked. So it didn't make sense to step outside of that and go and do something else. But funnily enough, one of the most amazing people on planet Earth, who I still speak to whenever I can, a guy called Paul Smith, who was Gordon the Gopher. You can stick that in. That's a nice little nod to Paul. What a genius he is. He actually had a VHS of me on Planet Pop. And he actually told me that he saw something that he liked. He just thought I was too fresh, I was too young. I needed to go away and get a bit of experience. But he always had his eye on me from that time at Planet Pop, and I didn't know any of this. He never got in touch. I ended up getting a job at the civil service, working in the Disability Living Allowance unit, working out, whether or not people should get paid for having one leg. And it was a bizarre job to get. My girlfriend got me at the time because I just had no work and I'd lost Planet Pop and the band wasn't happening. So I was at rock bottom again. And so I ended up auditioning for this TV show that was in the Trocadero in the West End, this new digital show when digital TV first started in 2000. It gave me a real chance to properly work out, to properly have some live TV exposure with not a lot of people watching, which was good because you can make mistakes and it doesn't cause too much damage to your profile or to your career if you make big mistakes. And I did. I made a lot of mistakes. But we were on for 4 hours a day. And we had to come up with our own content. I came up with a bit called Barney's Bits, where I would read the newspapers and try and find funny stories in these quirky parts of page 7 of The Sun. And I really started to work out what live TV should feel like. And I became better at talking to account. I became better at, I guess, finding content. Back in the day when we didn't call it content, it was just making telly. And then by the time I'd done that for a few years, Paul had been following the journey the entire time. And then he did one of the most incredible things anybody has ever done for me in my life. And I got a phone call at home, and it was just before Christmas. And he just said, my name is Paul Smith, I work for CBBC, we're launching this new digital channel. I just wondered if you think you're going to have a good Christmas. And I thought it was a bit weird. I was like, yeah, I think Christmas is going to be good, yeah. He said, any nice presents that you're sort of hoping for? And my line for that is, yeah, I'm hoping for a pony. I've always said that. He said, I've got a present for you. You're the new presenter on CBBC. You start in January. Give me a call when you're ready. And I remember just being that thing of what? As in really? That kind of just shock. He did such a nice thing for me because I was really the lowest I think I've been for a while. I was only a teenager, but I was the lowest I'd ever been because I'd had that taste of something. And it had fallen away, and not just fallen away with the chance to go and do something else. It fell away drastically. The band went, the TV went. I was now working in a job earning no money at all, and I hated it. And he gave me a real lifeline out of there. And then, I mean, how that turned into 17 years, I don't know. But everything just seemed to go really smoothly from that point on.
For lots of people starting out in the industry, that's the reality, I think, even still today, of the nature of how, this job works.
I think it's a given. I think it's a given that it was actually Michael Underwood who said to me when I first joined, because I used to shadow him and Liam Dolan in TC9 in the big studio for BBC One. And, I was talking about career and how nervous you get because you don't get appraisals. No one tells you that you're doing a good job. You just sort of turn up and do your thing, and you just sort of go home. Nobody really says, we like what you're doing, or we can move you further. And he actually said to me in the early days, the chances of being unemployed as a TV presenter are really high. If you're here for 3 years, you're going to do well. You've got to start thinking now about what comes next, because it will be here before you know it.
my final question for you, and it's a question we like to pose to everyone we interview, because we've spent this interview looking backwards, but looking forwards now, and looking to the next generation of children's television, I guess. Do you have any advice for people coming into the industry, and sort of any outlooks of where the industry is heading?
Well, I mean, that's two very different questions. I mean, if I was to give advice to somebody about being a TV presenter and being a part of a team, which you always are, you need to remember that at all times. You're not just that guy that's at the front doing that thing with that name and that personality. You're a part of a huge team. I couldn't have done what I did without the brilliant people behind me. I mean, really, all I did was turn up and say words. That's all I did. Regardless of whether there's a skill to it or not, whether there's a live element or not, I couldn't have done what I did in any of the shows that I did without that support, and those people are super important. A lot of the people that were researchers when I first started, or were runners when I first started, we're talking 23 years ago, I still speak to. I still have a relationship with a lot of people that I work with, because we went through a lot together, and it was part of that. When you thousands upon thousands of hotels, thousands of hours on the motorway, you've got to have some kind of connection to those people. So I would say don't take it too seriously and be a team player, I think would be definitely what I think I would have learned over those years. And the question regarding the future of children's television, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because it's not the same industry anymore, and it's not the same. We don't access the content in the same way. We now have this, because digital was always a dream. So even back in the day, early 2000s, 2004, 2005, we always kind of knew that on-demand thing was coming. I just don't think people realized how devastating it would be to television as a concept, as in you don't have to be at your house at a certain time on a certain day to watch a certain show anymore. You can watch it when you want, wherever you are. You can watch it in the car, you can watch it on the toilet, you can watch it on a train, and you can do it now, instantly. So there is no need for that TV thing to exist, that scheduling thing. And I think that takes a lot of stability out of producing content. I also think that you've got to produce more content now. If you think about the way certain streaming platforms are run, they have really popular series on there that might be superhero series or a particular drama with Jason Bateman in, which I can't get enough of. But they take 18 months to film, sometimes longer. But when they put them out on that streaming platform, you can watch it in 3 days. So you're absorbing content at a rate that's faster than it's ever been, and there's more demand than there's ever been for more and more content because of the way it's being distributed. And I think that for me feels like a slippery slope, because children's television and your time as a child is so important in those formative years. Your experiences, what you learn, how you receive information, how you retain it. When you're a kid, it happens more than it ever will in the rest of your life. And so we have a real responsibility to make sure that content is much more than just a throwaway, let's just binge this and get it done, or, trucking out the same old format. I mean, there are some videos that I've seen recently that my nephew watches of a young girl who just makes funny noises when these coloured things appear on the screen, and there's no script writing in it, there's no thought really, and they just churn out 10 of them a week because they just want hits, and they see the value in numbers rather than the value in the content itself. And I think it's crucial. I'm going to go on a big rant here. I'll stop immediately. I will stop in a few moments. But I think that who knows where it's going to go. I just hope that it doesn't go the way it looks like it's going to go. We've all heard the news about CBBC coming off air and being parked down this avenue online. And I think I think it's a real shame that that's happening. I think because that's the first bit of snow to fall before the avalanche comes, I think. And I think it's crucial that kids TV has a place wherever that place is. And I hope that even if it goes online, which, let's be honest, is where the audience are, I still hope the budgets are there, and I still hope they put a lot of attention. And I hope the fact that the content is being absorbed as quick as it is doesn't affect the quality of it, because it's really important that those kids have that in their life. That childhood is so important because you haven't learnt to not be a kid yet. I don't mean learn to be an adult, I mean learn to not be a kid. The older you get, the more you get that kind of, stop being childish, or, oh, grow up. That sort of stuff happens too quick. and you start to learn not to be a kid. And I think that while you're a kid and you've got the imagination that you've got, and you've got the energy that you've got, and you've got that pack of crayons at home, and you want to draw your favorite character and send them into them and say, I think you're amazing and I love what you do. And that childlike wonder and excitement and the encouragement they should have for that, I think should never go. And I think it's quite difficult to do that when it's so passive. You can just, it's almost like a pacifier now. It's the same as a dummy. Children's content seems to just be, oh, just watch that. And that's dangerous. I think that's really, really dangerous. I think we still have a responsibility to produce really good quality kids content that'll make them think, that'll teach them something, that'll get them excited about going outside and playing like children should do, rather than worrying about whether they've got abs by the time they're 8 because it's on Instagram or any of that social media tripe nonsense that it's genuinely scary what's happening online. And I think that as soon as you become a part of that and you're in the same medium as that stuff, I think it's very difficult to establish what's what. And the fact that kids TV is separate from that world and it's accessible in an entirely different way currently is super important. I think once those lines become blurry, yeah, the kids need to have that separate world. And I feel that way because I've seen my nephews on their phones and I've seen what they can access. And yeah, there's no policing there. There's no way they can't. They just find it. And I think that puts another dent in the childhood, when it should be a really safe and secure place that's in the land of Whizbit or Rent-A-Ghost or, any of those magical worlds where you can escape and just be a kid.
Thank you so much for your time and for joining us here at the conference.
You're welcome.
So I'm sure loads and loads of people are going to enjoy hearing this. And probably lots and lots of people that have recognised and worked with you throughout your career that are still in this industry today. Yeah, thank you.